They heard a sound that he couldn't identify, made his hair stand up. To this day, he says he's like, it was Bigfoot. They swear that both of them, they saw Bigfoot cross the road into the woods. My name is Scott Tompkins. I'm the creator of the Bigfoot Mapping Project by night, and by day, I work for a geophysical exploration company. I do GIS and data management for that company and for the Bigfoot Mapping Project. So I became interested in Bigfoot when I was about 14 years old. I was hiking on Mount Beacon in the town that I'm from, Beacon, New York, with a friend of mine, and we were at the top of the mountain, and there's a reservoir on the backside by like a fire tower. So we were rounding the corner around the backside of the reservoir, and we were going to hit the trail to the fire tower. And as we were doing that, this big tree just started shaking, and you heard what I can only describe as like a roar. So being 14, we didn't really stick around there. We looked at each other and bolted down the mountain. And we've always wondered what that was, right? So that stuck with me. I'm 37 now, so it stuck with me for a long time. And then traveling around the country doing geophysical exploration, I got to talk to a lot of different people. We had to get permission to do testing across their properties. So putting basically charges, like shot holes, they're called, of dynamite to create acoustic energy so we could create a seismic image of the Earth. And in those conversations, we had to talk about what was on their property, what was around their property, any concerns they had. And the more I got to know these people, the more they kind of opened up, because I lived on the prospects and sometimes they took a couple of years to finish. So I got to be a part of the town and learn about the town and know everyone there. As I got to know these people, they would open up about things that had happened on their property, right? So if they had what they thought was Bigfoot sightings or anything weird, they would just start to share. And I thought it was really interesting. And in the back of my mind, being a GIS guy, I thought, oh man, I've really got to catalog this and put it into a map and a database, because these are just stories floating out there and staying with these people. And unless they're captured somewhere and cataloged in a centralized database, we're never really going to get to the bottom of this. So carrying that experience from when I was 14 all the way to now, and when I started the project, is really what inspired me to get the Bigfoot Mapping Project going.
Well, let's go back to this experience that you had at 14. Can you give me more detail about that? Because that had to have been kind of was it a little bit unnerving?
Oh, yeah, we ran down the whole mountain. So um
Yeah.
it it was quite loud. And looking back, you wonder, was it somebody that was trying to pull a prank or, mess with a couple kids that were hiking up the mountain? But the tree that was shaking was so large. Like I'm not a small guy, but I'm not a large guy. I couldn't shake the tree that it was shaking. It was violent. And the volume of the roar that we heard was just deafening. So it was definitely startling. And it was one of those things, like when you're in the wilderness and you hear something you don't expect or that sounds threatening, it kind of sets off that primal fight or flight. And we definitely had the flight reflex, and we took it all the way to the bottom of the mountain.
So it was a growl. Can you describe it more specifically?
I'm trying to remember. It was over 20 years ago, but it was a deep, not like a lion roar or anything like that, but more like an ape roar would be, like a gorilla would sound, I would imagine.
More like that.
Pretty testy and deep and breathy, if that makes
Was it
sense.
was it a single growl or was it a repetitive sound?
Oh no, it was repetitive, like an ape would do. Definitely.
Yeah. And as you're running down the mountain, did it seem to be following you or was it staying away?
Nope, nothing followed us that we were aware of. We just wanted to get away from that spot, but nothing seemed to be pursuing us at all. It actually seemed to just maybe be a warning to stay away from that spot or not to go any closer. So we definitely didn't.
Did you go back at all?
Oh yeah, I've been back there plenty of times. I grew up in Beacon, and over the years have always that's one of my favorite trails to hike. And every time I go past that spot, I tell the story to whoever I'm with, and I always take a peek around. It was just behind like I don't want to say a ridge, but like a little hit rolling type hill, and the tree was on going down the backside of the hill. And I always, walk up to the top and look around up there, and really never find anything. There's so much leaf litter on the ground that it's hard to see um, if there was anything there. But I always look if I do the hike. I go back there frequently. Frequently, it's a great hiking trail.
And are you able to identify the tree you saw shaking?
Oh, it was a maple tree for sure. It
Okay.
was a big maple tree.
Well, that had to have been a little bit of an eye-opening experience because that just isn't something that happens to us every day of the week.
No, no, especially as a kid, it kind of scares you and sticks with you. Um, and then actually flash forward after I started the project, if you don't mind me jumping forward, I did have a much better experience where I did see a Bigfoot, and we were close in proximity. It was close enough where I could see a good silhouette. And that one didn't happen in New York, and I can go into that if you'd like to hear
Yeah, let's
that
go ahead
that
and,
experience.
explore that experience.
Sure. So growing up, I'm sure you can see behind me, I like to hunt. I like to be outdoors. I like to hike, and I like to understand the wilderness and nature. And one of those evenings, I was bow hunting in Sealy, Texas, and I lease about 200 acres for hunting from a very, very nice rancher. And I was walking out of this river bottom with my bow, and it was too dark to hunt anymore. So I was just coming out for the night. I hadn't seen anything. And on my left shoulder, I went through the barbed wire fence and into the pasture out of the river bottom. And on my left shoulder, there was the barbed wire, and I was walking towards back to my truck, basically, like a few thousand feet back to my truck. And as I got closer, I looked off to my left, which I guess would have been like my 11 o'clock and 10, 11 o'clock. And there was what looked like a wild boar. It looked like a blob behind like a sagebrush almost. So I just stopped, and I was like 40 yards away. And I just thought, it's a big, that looks big. I'm going to let him go on his way and just not mess with it, because a 400 pound boar, it's not something you really want to tangle with. So I just decided to stay unnoticed, what I thought, and let it go. And then I'd walk back to my truck. But when I was standing there, this blob just stood up. It stood up, and it must have been over 7 feet tall, because the grass there is like 3.5 feet tall. It comes up to your navel just about. So I couldn't see. I saw just basically just its torso and its shoulders and arms and head and everything. And when it stood up, I was in kind of just like buffering, like what's happening? And I just muttered, "Whoa," just like that, out loud, and not very loud, kind of just to myself, but it must have heard me, and it squatted back down. And when it squatted back down, I was standing there like I didn't know what to do. So I said out loud to it, like, "I see you." And from there, it stood back up, turned around, and bolted through all the bramble and the briars and into a thicket. And it just, once it hit that thicket, I could still hear it crashing full speed through this thicket of woods, which, with no light and all the things there are to trip over, cactus that are you know what I mean, all these pointy things in Texas, there's no way that it was a person. And as large as it was, I wish somebody was there with me to have seen it, because it was large. It looked like it was wearing football pads, and it had a large, kind of pointy head and no neck. And I could actually see its arms out to the side, and like its cupped, like I'll do a demonstration, like its cupped hand was kind of hanging off both sides, kind of cupped like that. And that was, talk about adrenaline. I ran back to my truck, got in the truck, locked the doors. And first person I called was my mom to tell her about it. But that one, I am very, very confident that I saw and encountered a Bigfoot. No doubt in my mind. There was no cars. The ranch that I hunt on is 11,000 acres. There's no houses around the area. And I looked because I thought, all right, this I've got to what was happening here, and it had to have been a Bigfoot. I can't explain it any other way.
How far away were you from it again?
30, 40 yards. So I
Okay.
got a good, I wasn't able to get detail because it was that time of night when everything's like blue, gray, dark, and there's no color besides like that, you know what I mean, when the night is setting in. So I just saw the silhouette, but I was about 30 or 40 yards away, give or take.
So, so you couldn't get like a color or expression of the face or any features of the face or anything like that?
I couldn't get any features. Color, if I had to guess a color, just because it was so similar to what I thought it was, a wild boar, I would guess it was dark, like dark brown, almost a black color fur or hair, because it was so dark. And the only reason I say that is because I've seen what hogs look like in that same light, and it was very, very, very similar.
So during
Although
your
they don't walk
mapping,
on. Go ahead, sorry.
during your mapping project, are there any other sightings in that vicinity that you have encountered?
Not in that immediate area. Really, it is a very sparse area. There's not a lot of people that live there. And I looked on the map thinking the same thing has anybody else had an experience? And really not for a few miles, maybe 20 miles away, um, from that sighting. So I was surprised to see that nobody else had seen anything. But then again, you do need people to have a sighting, and that is an area where it's just wide open. It's a prairie type environment, and there's not many roads that go through. Um, there's a lot of places to hide. So I can understand why, that would be a good place for Bigfoot to be and not be seen. I just might have surprised it.
Yeah, especially if there isn't a lot of human traffic through that area. You might have been definitely a surprising figure there. So let's jump back to before you started the mapping project. And you said, it inspired you because you were hearing these stories. Tell me a few of the early stories that you heard that then prompted you to go ahead and start keeping that as kind of a mapping database.
Sure. I was working in northwestern Louisiana. In the Haynesville Shale is the name of the play that we were looking at when I was working there. And um, in particular, one of the houses I had to go out and visit with the guy that owned the house there. We got talking about hunting, and he told me that he years before had seen a brown and white Bigfoot come walking through the woods while he was sitting in his tree stand. And he swore up and down. And I don't trust hunters more, but I trust them when they tell me they are sure that it was a Bigfoot because they're out observing wildlife a lot more. And he was adamant. And at the time I was, I guess, in my early 20s. I didn't really take it too seriously except for, oh, there's Bigfoot out here. And, I had a job to do, so we didn't stay on the topic too long. But it always just, as I was driving around that area, I would think like, man, I wonder if I'm going to see, like, is there really a Bigfoot here? And he was so adamant, and he swore up and down that he saw a brown and white Bigfoot. That it just kind of stuck with me because how many people, would tell and swear to a stranger like me that they saw something like that? And then in West Virginia, there was a lot of people that lived in the mountains there. I was working just outside of Charleston, on the Kanawha River, and we would go visit people, and they would just say, be careful. You guys need to be careful out there because there's creatures, there's Bigfoot, there's stuff out there in the hills that'll mess with you or get you or is dangerous, and you just need to be careful. And almost, you know, every other person would say something like that. So it starts to stick with you. It's like, do I need to look over my shoulder? How common is this? And then as you go to different states, so West Virginia, I talked about Louisiana, Oklahoma, similar stories popped up in Western Oklahoma and like north, kind of around Enid, Fairview area. Um, People would say, oh, so and so, my neighbor or my grandfather had seen a very strange creature on our property over here, because you're driving around with them in like a UTV and they're telling you about their ranch, or because generally people out there have hundreds to thousands of acres. So it takes a long time to go through the property. And as you're driving with them and making maps or making notes, they'll start to tell you about what happened on the property as well. And that's what would happen. Like they drive and they'd pass like a gate and they're like, oh, if you go down that gate and go to the road and the pond down on the backside of that hill at the bottom, that's where my grandfather saw Bigfoot. And we'll never forget. He always told that story. So those things, and when you hear them like in one isolated area, you're like, okay, it's local, kind of just the lore. But then you go, almost across the country to Louisiana from West Virginia, and then to Oklahoma and Pennsylvania as well, where I work. You always heard something similar, and that's what kind of did it for me is hearing these stories and these anecdotes from these people that had these experiences that were so similar around the country. That's where I started to think, okay, this is a phenomenon that's happening to a lot of people. Why isn't this more studied and more organized?
So you decided to at least start a project. Now, what all does the mapping project include?
So the mapping project is really just me, even though I say we, the royal we, a lot. It's basically what it is a web application. And the important part of the web application is the crowdsourcing side, which is where anyone can report their encounter or sighting and submit evidence such as photos or recordings, etc., through the crowdsourcing form that we have on the site. Now, the other half of that is the map, where all the data is stored in the backend database that kind of go hand in hand. And people can explore the interactive map and click on all the points in the map and read those sightings and look at the evidence. I don't gatekeep anything. Anything that gets submitted, I do read, because sometimes people like to pull, they're kind of trolls and they'll put stuff in the report that they really shouldn't put, but that doesn't happen very often, actually. Um, so like I was saying, you can go through the map and click on the points and read all these sightings and look in your area. I've created a new map, new application that you can also filter all the data and search through the data as well. So for example, if you're looking for just footprint reports, you can go into the filter and choose just footprint reports and in your area, and it'll show just the points in the map that are footprints, for example. So it's meant to be an application that puts the data at everyone's fingertips and also collects data in an organized, standardized way so that we can run reports and run analysis on it. And that's what I do. If you go on Instagram, is where I put a lot of the maps that I make. I take all that raw data that's been submitted and I do some analysis on it. So I do like density analysis. I enrich the data. I do comparisons to like land use, land cover, elevation, precipitation, all different kinds of analysis that you can look at. And I publish maps that look at those types of angles, because not everyone has access to GIS software or data like that and the ability to manipulate it and work with it like I do. So that is I guess I'd call it a service that I do for the Bigfoot Mapping Project to share with everyone as well.
Well, what have you discovered from that? Give me some details on what you know that I might be interested in, as to what you have discovered.
Sure. So one of my favorite uh, discoveries, or at least findings, I would call it, would be working with a data set called the Green Infrastructure Data Set. And this is least cost pathway data that ESRI, Environmental Science Research Institute, has created for responsible building practices and development so that we can balance out construction and development with the environment. And one of those products that they created is, like I said, least cost pathways, and that connects, those pathways connect wildlife hubs. So like a state park or a forest to another forest through a populated area, for example. So I've looked at all these pathways that are an authoritative data set. I did not create it. These are verified, created by people that are much smarter than me. And I've intersected those pathways with the database of sightings that we've got at the Bigfoot Mapping Project. And most of the reports that have been submitted have intersected with these pathways that other wildlife travels. So for me, that's a big validation that Bigfoot is out there in the wilderness traveling in a similar way that most of other wildlife travels. And it's a check in the box to keep going, because that means there's something out there that's interacting with the environment just like in a natural way. And it was kind of an external verification for me, and a good way to show people that, a lot of these reports shouldn't be dismissed as hoaxes, because these people that were submitting them didn't have access to this data set. Just came out a couple of years ago. They didn't have access to this data set to have the intelligence behind, they're planning for a hoax, to go out and say, all right, this is where the pathway is. I'm going to put a point here in the map, and just say I saw. Like, it would be really nearly impossible to fake that. So it was really motivating to see the data come together and mesh and match in the way that it did in those particular analysis. And I think I did like 40 or so states. If they had a significant number of Bigfoot sightings, I did the analysis on the state, at the state level. That was a really good one. Another one that I found interesting is Kentucky. I looked at Kentucky because there's a lot of like caves there, and I think it's called the Cave State. And when I looked at the proximity of reports to caves in Kentucky, that was also very interesting, because a lot of people ask, where does Bigfoot hide? For example, how does it elude people that are looking for it? And a lot of theories point towards caves or karst systems. So I looked at that in Kentucky, and actually another state that I looked at it in is Nevada. In those two states, those maps are up on my Instagram. They both, the clusters of Bigfoot sightings are very, very close to caves. And I also don't think that's a coincidence either. So those are two very validating findings that I think stick out to me throughout all the analysis that I've done. Other analysis include like environmental factors, like canopy cover, what types of forests are these sightings occurring in, and things like that. But these two sightings that I described, compared to the rest of the analysis I've done, to me are the most validating.
What else? What others did you discover? I mean, did you find anything on waterways or access to movement through? Yes, we're doing a show right now. I'm in the process of filming Byways with Bigfoot, and we're looking at evidence along a 200-mile riverway that is fairly secluded. And because there have been a lot of reports or sightings along that river. So
Oh, absolutely.
what have you found with that?
Yes, absolutely. So I should have mentioned, in those least cost pathways, their waterways are included in those travel routes. So definitely, there are a lot of reports that come through, and whether or not it's a coincidence, because generally along a waterway, there's mud, or easily the soil's in a good condition to leave a track or a print. So there are a lot of prints or track evidence along rivers, and also there's a lot of reports that intersect the byways along like a river or a creek, or a water feature like that. Yes, definitely. I wouldn't have a percentage per se, but I did do an analysis about a year ago where I put a buffer. So I selected like a distance of a quarter mile from any known river that I had the data set for. So it's just a polyline of the center line of the river, right? Across the whole nation. And at the time, I think I had 6 or 7,000 sightings in the database, including the historical data set that is the base part of the map. And probably 1/3 of them were within a quarter mile from a waterway.
Yeah, that's a lot of the interviews that I do. People have definitely witnessed something in water, close to water, while they're fishing, hunting. But oftentimes, water is very intricate to the sighting itself. Have you found any one location that seems to have more in the way of activity? I mean, you said Kentucky, but in any like location across the U.S., do you have them? Statistically mapped out as to where would I be more likely to find a Bigfoot?
Well, everyone knows the number one answer is the Pacific Northwest, but
Right.
I've got some surprising answers. There's just east of Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania. I think it's Chestnut Ridge, um, is very, very active. Ohio is very active as well, pretty much the entire state. Then a surprising one, or at least it was surprising to me, was Florida, Ocala, Florida, like Ocala State Park down there in north central Florida was very, very active. It's one of the hot spots across the country, one of the biggest hot spots. And that one I think is interesting because there's also an elusive predator that lives in that area, which is the Florida mountain lion or cougar. So there's evidence there that it can support that environment, can support a large mammal. Granted, they probably don't have the same diet, but it is interesting that that predator coincides with a hot spot where Bigfoot is reported. So that's an interesting one that I would like to get down to Florida or over to Florida from Texas and explore there. I'm trying to think of another one. The Sierra Nevada in California is a good, just outside Strawberry, California. I think it's the name of the forest will come to me in a second. But just outside Strawberry, California, there's a hot spot. And East Texas, the state forest there, Sam Houston State Forest, is also a very big hot spot in Texas. So you can go around the country and see from the Pacific Northwest, which is the biggest hotspot, down to California, over to Texas, then over to Florida, and then up the East Coast. You have the hot spots which occur in like I said, southwestern Pennsylvania and also like Ohio, that area as well.
Lots of different areas. Has it become more popular since it's been out there for a little while? How long has it been out there? When did you start this mapping project?
The projects I started a little over 3 years ago. So during quarantine is when I went live. I'd been working on it before then. So I launched it. I guess it's 2024, so a little over 3 years ago. And in the database that have been crowdsourced, we have almost 1,000 sightings since then that have been submitted, um, which I think is a really big accomplishment because the historical database that I collected from a website called Manjani's website, where they aggregated the BFRO's database and other databases from research organizations and made it public. They have a total of like 6,000, something like that. So in 3 years, we've contributed, 1/6 of what people have collected over, known Bigfoot research that's been put in a database like that. So I think we're going pretty good and we're getting some really good information. Actually, as a matter of fact, I just got a very interesting report yesterday from, it should be orange on the map if you look at it, in Vermont, where the person that submitted it, the witness, found a big trackway, which when she walked, she submitted a video with it of her walking the trackway, and she can count 5 steps in between each footprint on the trackway in Vermont in the snow. And there's not many things that make a bipedal type trackway that a human, an adult, can take 5 steps in between each track. It's really, that one was pretty compelling. That was very interesting. Um, I wish I was closer to Vermont. I would have been out there to look at it.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. But I have heard of several cases where the snow is actually an easier place to see their footprint, and to see that stride can be so massive.
Yeah,
It's amazing.
it was quite interesting to see it on a video the way she took it, and it was really nice because she was counting her steps from, and you could see her step alongside the trackway, and she was counting as she was stepping, and you could see the next track coming up. So it was, you know, pretty convincing. I can't think of many things in the track pattern that it made that would make such a long stride.
Exactly. So what else? You read the reports, right? You go in and you actually physically read the reports. Does anyone
Mhm.
follow up on these? Does anyone go out and talk with the people or contact them or anything?
Yes, sometimes I will send them along to researchers I know in the area. Um, I don't have like field researchers that are specifically associated to the mapping project. However, I've made acquaintances and friends with people throughout the country. So if I know that a report occurs in their area, I will send it along. But first, the first thing I do is ask the person that submitted it if it's okay to send it along, because that's a part of the project is some people are concerned about their information getting out there or being associated to a report. So I try to keep it a little anonymous. You can't see who's made the report on the website or anything like that, but I do capture email. So I will email the person and ask if I can share their report with a researcher and if it's okay if they follow up. So yes, there are regionally researchers that I wouldn't say I'm teamed up with, but that um, I've worked with before that I will share the information with. And I'm not opposed to sharing reports or locations with any researcher. I just happen to go straight to these people because I'm friends with them or I've worked with them before.
Exactly. So do you ever follow up on that to see if there's any kind of more conclusive evidence and any kind of experiences that people have had when they have followed up with?
Yes, actually, one of the researchers I work with is Alex Pedikov, and one of the areas we've been looking at that would be this kind of vein would be the Atchafalaya area and the Honey Island Swamp. He and I worked together to look at the reports and what's happened in the area, and he's done a lot of planning where we actually did do an expedition together and paddle on kayaks deep into the Atchafalaya and do exploration of our own and a search of our own based on the evidence we found in the report. So we'll extrapolate on the evidence and also visit with witnesses that made reports or that come in while we're in the area. But that's a good example of us getting boots on the ground and going from the information that's been submitted and going out on our own and trying to find more evidence.
And what did you find from that trip? Did you find anything interesting?
Nothing compelling, unfortunately. We we stayed deep in the swamp, but uh, we didn't. We heard something that might have been tree knocks, but it was hard. It was hard to really say confidently that it was. Lots of wildlife, but nothing conclusively, obviously a Bigfoot. Other than the questionable tree knocks that we had where we were based.
Tell me a little bit more about this geophysical work that you do. Now you're setting off little explosions to understand, explain all of that to me.
Sure, it's kind of commonly known as seismic exploration. So it's for drilling for oil and gas or doing carbon capture or mapping faults in the formations beneath the surface of the earth. And what they do is there's two ways to get the energy into the ground. One is called a vibra-sized truck. It's a very, very large truck, and it has a pad that they lower onto the ground and they shake it and it vibrates. It kind of sounds like and it goes up through different hertz. and it gets those different energy and acoustic waves into the ground that are then picked up by geophones, which are magnets that translate that acoustic energy into like an electrical energy that can be recorded. And the other energy method that I described is just shot hole, where you basically drill, I don't know, 30, 40, 50, all the way down to 60 feet and put like a charge of like pentolite. I don't know what they're using in the field anymore, but that we've used pentolite before, which is like dynamite. And then you pack it and you seal the hole so that it focuses the energy downward, kind of like a gun barrel. And when that goes off, it makes a big thump, boom, boom, and um, that shot hole is captured. And you do that in a grid pattern all around your prospect, where the geophones are also put out in lines. So there's thousands of them, and they capture that energy from different angles to make a 3D picture. So that's what they're doing with geophysical exploration. It's actually quite fun. It's very, it sounds like it's quite invasive, but it's really surgical. It's really not. They don't disturb the wildlife or the environment too much, other than when they're, going in to do the testing and coming back out. You wouldn't know they were there otherwise. It's really interesting. And in fact, those guys that are in the field, the surveyors and the field workers that do the testing, always report seeing wildlife. Or they always report, bears in Pennsylvania. That we worked in Center County, Pennsylvania, has like the most bear concentration outside of, I think, New Jersey on the East Coast. There's bears all over the place. They do a like a bear rally opening day, where they hunt bears and they weigh them all and have a competition at the fire department in Center County. So our guys were there, and you can see them. The helicopter flies over the field, the survey, and we'd have to warn the guys like, "Hey, there's a bear off your right shoulder, 200 yards. Just kind of steer clear. We can see it from the helicopter." Things like that. So it's very interesting. It's very busy. It's very fun. I've learned a lot from doing that. I enjoyed my field work. I'm in the office now, so I think I took my lumps in the field, and I'd like to stay in the office. But it was a really, really fun job to do the testing out there and get to be deep in the wilderness. And there was points where we traversed everything. If that line went up a mountain and down the backside of that mountain, that's where we walked. So we definitely got to know the land very well, and really firsthand probably walked places that people live there never went, doing this testing. It's very interesting.
Couple of questions I have. The people that are in the field now that are out there, any reports from them about Bigfoot activity, or people telling them about Bigfoot activity? Do you stay in touch with them?
I stay in touch with them. They're onshore US. There hasn't been a lot of activity as far as new surveys. So I haven't really talked to a field crew. There's been jobs. I think they did some in Wyoming, in West Texas, Oklahoma, but I haven't really received a lot of any talk like that. Most of the folks there was a downturn in the industry, and most of the folks that I worked with in the field kind of left the industry after that downturn, and I stayed in Houston in the office. So I don't really have a lot of tendrils out there collecting information from the field like I used to.
Exactly. How about response? And I don't know how you would correlate this actually, but have any property owners noticed any kind of increased or decreased Bigfoot activity on their properties because of this experimentation on the land?
That's a very good question. Not that they've explicitly said no, but I don't think it's a coincidence that I was out there and during this testing and these people were having these experiences. I don't know if they're related or correlated in any way. But I can definitively say that while I was in the field doing these surveys, people were telling me these things. So that's a very good question. I've really never had anybody come back and say that they had anything occur after we came through and finished.
Mhm. Yeah, because I would think that, I don't know the nature of Bigfoot, of course, but I would think if there was something unusual like this that doesn't happen very often, in
Hmm.
their backyard, basically, it might cause some kind of a change in their behavior potentially.
Sure. I mean, deer, for example. I mean, if you, that's they say the best time to. I hate to make this reference. People don't always appreciate that I'm a hunter, but the best one of the best times to see your target deer or see any deer is after they cut a field, right? It's activity that doesn't normally happen. It's human activity. It's human influence on the land that the animals and wildlife are responding to. Like you, even outside of deer, you'll see birds fly behind tractors when they're tilling, like hawks and stuff, because there's unfortunately a byproduct of doing that is killing rodents and things like that. So animals, I guess my point is animals will take advantage sometimes in different ways of what humans do that influences the land. And I'm very curious now if the testing that we did had any influence on Bigfoot behavior. Not that I'm aware of or that's been reported, but that's a really, really interesting thought.
Well, not only what you did, but or still doing potentially, but also, other environmental changes that happen. I have heard of Bigfoot being present in a certain area, and then they come through and clear it and fill in creeks or fill in, valleys or whatever and build something there. And of course the Bigfoot just disappears. They're no longer present in a vicinity, of course, because what they were there for to start with is now gone. Um, so I can understand them moving on, leaving a place. But I haven't heard of anything like that, that didn't disturb it on an ongoing basis or really disrupt their life that much. I don't know how they would respond to that. Yeah.
Me either. I'd imagine just based on the general consensus through the reports I read that they're very adaptable, it seems, and they are very good at living alongside people and remaining hidden. Um, so I think you're on to something when you say like if it doesn't completely disrupt what they're there for or continuously interrupt their environment, I think they're able to tolerate it pretty well. And then, maybe just stay out of the way and then wait till the activity's done and get on with their whatever they were doing or looking for, or if it's too much, move on to a different area. But I do think that they're very, very good at living alongside people. Judging from the reports that occur in proximity to places that are pretty big cities where you wouldn't think they would be, but they're in a greenway. And they're pretty close to people and they're going unseen by most, right? So I think we don't necessarily have as big a negative impact on Bigfoot as we would think with some of the activities that we're doing. I just think they're very, very adapted to dealing with human development and progress.
I've heard of like logging companies, and they
Mhm.
move in on Bigfoot territory, and Bigfoot doesn't like it very much, and they may be a little disruptive to some of the equipment and things like that. Now, I don't know that your company was really in their environment for extended periods of time, but you never had them like come around equipment or anything like that.
Not that was reported. We did have vandalism. We always have some kind of vandalism or something, kids on the prospect or people that, for one reason or another don't want us there. Um, so that happened, but never exclusively reported as like something unknown or a Bigfoot like that. But there was definitely vandalism and equipment went missing, especially cables out in the field. One of the things which is odd because they're just laying on the ground. And when I say cable, it's what the geophones are attached to. It looks like an extension cable. And those would go, and they're thousands, they're kilometers long, some of them, and they would go missing. Sections of them would go missing. So, and I do know wildlife interacts with them because one of the weird things that happens out there is you can actually see it, like coyotes chew on the cable as well, or rabbits. You can even see them bouncing next to a geophone. So we know when wildlife is out there near the equipment, but weirdly enough, some of it would go missing in remote parts of the prospect where you wouldn't expect things to even be found.
Well, that is kind of odd,
It is,
especially
yeah.
for.
And I always assumed it was carried off by like a coyote or something. I never really thought that Bigfoot would be doing it. That's a new thought for me.
So about how big and about how much weight are we talking about in a large stretch of this cable?
So if you imagine like rolling up an extension cord for a few hundred feet, so 40, 50 pounds maybe sometimes would be dragged off or cut or missing. And then geophones themselves, very small. They're like a styrofoam cup size sometimes. And now they're nodal now. We don't have cables and they're about the size of a coffee can. So they're depending on how much goes missing, it could be pretty difficult to carry it, or it could be pretty heavy.
Yeah, and I guess like with a coyote, I mean, I guess they just have to get a grip, um, uh, grip on it with their mouth and drag for. But you never found them like not far away or anything like that. They were just totally gone.
Yeah, that's right. Sometimes they would be completely missing. We always assumed they were stolen by people that were looking for copper, but there's no copper in these cables. Um, but they were in remote places when they were missing, and it was just kind of like, all right, that equipment's missing. Let's replace it, look for it. If we can't find it, and then finish the testing and move on, right? It's just there's a schedule to keep to, and if there's a missing 100-foot section, people would look for it, try to find it, but generally, across thousands of feet and kilometers of cable, they just replace it and move on. They didn't, spend too much time looking for it.
Yeah, I can understand that. That's really interesting because there are so many different reasons that people have to be out there among in Bigfoot territory. There's lots of different reasons. Yours is very unique. You're the first person I've talked to with this type of tracking of Bigfoot, as well as just the reasons that you had to be out there and hear about it. Tell me about some more of the cases that you have that have been reported and some of the more interesting ones.
One of the most interesting ones, there's two actually, and they both happen on both sides of my family. So on my wife's side, my father-in-law is also, I would say, a very story until I started the Bigfoot Mapping Project, and he brought it up. He was like, he was in the Honey Island swamp hunting with a couple friends, and they heard a sound that he couldn't identify, right? And it, made his hair stand up. And to this day, he says he's like, it was big. It was something that is not he's never encountered before. And for him to, he's kind of a no nonsense guy and very good at identifying wildlife. So for him to come out and say that he saw something like that or heard something like that rather in the Honey Island swamp, that makes that area much more interesting to me already, even given what's the documentation that surrounds that area that comes from external sources outside of my family. For a family member of mine to have an experience there, it really sticks out. Excuse me. And then secondly, my father and my brother in New York were years ago driving from Beacon to, I guess they were going to like Poughkeepsie or Wappingers and the next town over. And they swear up and down that they saw, it was very early in the morning. They swear, both of them swear that they saw Bigfoot cross the road into the woods. And if you've ever met my dad, I'd have to say he's not one. Do you ever remember the cartoon Droopy Dog where it was like, I am smiling,
Yes.
that kind of guy? That's my
Uh-huh.
dad. So he's not one to get animated or excited about something like that, and really not one to tell a weave a story like that. And then also my brother was young at the time, but he went on later in life to become an Apache pilot and a major in the U.S. Army. So for him, still to this day, he swears they saw something. And those are two people, three people really, that I really, really trust their knowing them. I know their judgment. I know they wouldn't lie about that. You know what I mean? So if that occurred so frequently in my family between Louisiana, where my wife's family lives, and New York, where my family lives, and I've had sightings in Texas and also on the mountain in New York. Those are things that, to me, if it's that, I hate to use the word common, but if it's occurred that frequently to people that I know that are in my family, how many times has it happened to other people? Are they just not talking about it? How common is this? How much does this occur? But those sightings in particular, because I trust implicitly the people that they're coming from, really motivate me to start keep gathering this information with the project. So um, that's in my family, and then outside, like other reports that I've received from people, like there's just like I referenced the one that's in Vermont that I just received, where the witness sent in video. There's reports from different hunters, and I think I keep bringing hunters up because I enjoy hunting and I think I relate to them a lot. But there's a hunter in Colorado that found footprints, and this guy has been a guide for over 20 years in the Colorado backcountry, and he submitted a sighting of a track report. And part of the track report that he also found was where they stacked, and this is remote, and these rocks were stacked not like you see them on the hiking trails where they're stacked in like a just a rock stack along the way. I forget the name of it, but these were like placed on a rock face inside of indentations on the rock face, intricately, and he submitted a picture of that. I thought that one was interesting because I was wondering if that meant something. Is that some kind of sign or message that a Bigfoot, because it was near the footprint, that a Bigfoot would leave for another Bigfoot? And then I'm trying to think of other ones that have come through. There's so many. Um, there's one in northern Idaho that is also very compelling. It's again a trackway that was submitted by a hunter that was out elk hunting, but they found a trackway in the snow. Snow is a really useful when you're finding tracks. What else? There's so many, so many. Um, Off the top of my head, that those are the ones that I can really, really pull off the top of my head and describe as really sticking out to me. So about four or five of them.
Sounds like you're on top of things and you've only been doing this for 3 years. So I hope the project gets to be more well known and people are able to give him more information. It seems like more people are coming forward with this. Like you said, it's like people don't talk about it. If you bring it up first, they might tell you, but otherwise they don't. So I'm sure there are a lot more sightings out there than we're hearing about even.
Yes. On that note, I mean, I've shared, most people wouldn't share that they are the Bigfoot Mapping Project creator at their place of work, but the company I work at is full of scientists and like PhDs and master's degree folks, and very serious, like very academic people. And when I describe the project to them, they get so interested in it. And I've had people make suggestions on how to analyze things, and they dive right into the map. And then they've actually come and start to talk about, like, they didn't realize. I think one of the things it does is it illustrates the phenomenon in a way that a lot of people I found think that it's just one Bigfoot for some reason that's wandering the country in front of it, and walking in front of people. But when they can see all the reports in context across, they're like, oh, this is a real species that's out there. That's one thing that it does. And then the other thing is it exposes what technology can do, like GIS, in capturing and storing all this information and really making it easy to analyze. And there was one other thing I was going to say along those lines. I can't remember now. I get off on a tangent about the technology and stuff, and I get really excited about it.
Well, we were talking about how people don't come forward with information unless you bring it up first, and then they realize they're in safe company, then they might share their experiences, and that there are a lot more experiences out there than what we're hearing about sometimes.
Absolutely. I think the aspect that helps with that is something I referenced earlier, where there's a slight anonymity to submitting a report. That's not It's not going in the local newspaper. You're not talking about it at a family dinner, but you still have a place to share that information. And I'm not going to advertise, that you, Linda, submitted a report to the mapping project. That's not what I'm here for. I'm not here to expose anybody or push them outside of, their comfort zone with what they want to be shared. But I think when they find a venue or a platform like the project to submit and share their information, they've they feel comfortable sharing it because they know that it's contributing to something that they know they saw or experienced, and we're trying to get to an answer. And then on the flip side of that, I've had people plan their entire vacations around the information that they find in the project, which I also think is really, really cool and it's rewarding.
Exactly. If you want to see a Bigfoot, you need to go where they are at least, right?
Exactly. Exactly. So, um, one thing I think that I'd like to do in the future, when I'm more organized, because we just had a baby, so I apologize if I repeat myself a little. I've not had very much sleep. Um, but when I get, into a rhythm and a routine with our baby and work, I would like to start to reach out to more people in the field. That's been a big ambition, but I want to make sure there are people that are qualified and responsible and reliable. And I think that's going to be a big process. So I really haven't invested a lot of time in doing that yet. But that is an ambition that I have for the project. Along with another ambition that I've got is um, I would like to create a network of trail cameras in hot spots that are maintained by people in those areas as well. I think that would be really interesting to do, and then publish those photos on the website so people can see what's being captured. Um, that's a big one that I'd like to do as well.
Sounds like a wonderful, ambitious project, and I thank you for creating this. I look at the maps a lot. I like to see what's going on and what people are reporting. So I think those are very interesting things to do. I really appreciate it. Is there
My
anything else you
pleasure.
wish to share?
Not that I can think of. Just where to find the project would be just bigfootmap.com, and on Instagram, it's at Bigfoot Mapping Project. And also, if you'd like to email me, anybody can email me. It's just Scott, SCOTT, at bigfootmap.com.
Sounds good. I hope people watch this and I hope they get in touch with you.
Likewise, thank you for having me.
Yeah.
I'm glad you reached out, and I went through your profile and I saw a lot of the videos you do. So I know what I'm gonna be binging while I feed the baby late at night. So
There are some great stories on there. I've come across a lot of wonderful people that have been willing to tell their stories and tell it from the heart. It's a real genuine experience they have, and you can tell the difference in when people really, really did have that experience. It shows.
you really can. And having had one myself, I feel like I've got a barometer for people that are sensational, I would say, versus people that have had, like you said, a genuine experience. And I don't go into any conversation thinking one thing or another, but there are points where you're like, I want to believe, I've got to be skeptical or at least not be gullible, right? So
That's it. Yes, exactly. Well, I appreciate you being with me today. I'm going to go ahead and end our interview right now, and I'll let you know when this comes out.
wonderful. Thank you. Thank you again for having me, and have a great day.